Let's talk about Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns. The clock is ticking with Kevin Stefanski, and his tenure may be coming to an end in Cleveland very soon. We're going to get into the problems that I have with Kevin Stefanski up to this point in the season and the problems I had with him last year. But I also want to give Kevin Stefanski a lot of credit. He's done a lot of good things in the past with this organization. 2020, that was his first Coach of the Year award. Rightfully deserved. They made the NFL playoffs that year, and they won a playoff game over the Steelers. Now, for context here, they had Hugh Jackson 2 years before. He was a terrible head coach, one of the worst head coaches in NFL history. They moved off him in season. You had Greg Williams as your interim head coach. You push him to the wayside. Then you make Freddie Kitchens your head coach after that. The Cleveland Browns were still in the basement in the NFL. Baker Mayfield was having good moments. He was having bad moments in his first 2 years. But in that third season, Baker Mayfield finally took the right step forward. And he won that playoff game. And a lot of Cleveland Brown fans, they'll come out and they'll say that Kevin Stefanski did not win that game. To be fair here, he did not coach in that matchup. He was dealing with the pandemic issue. But Kevin Stefanski did coach that team up for the entire season, and he helped them make the NFL playoffs. I still give him that playoff win. That was still his coaching staff on the sideline. And we all understand what happened with Baker Mayfield, more in his situation in a second here. But in 2023, Kevin Stefanski goes out there. His starting quarterback, Deshun Watson, goes down for majority of the season. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was the backup. He was completely terrible. You didn't have a starting option. So they call in Joe Flacco off the street. Can you come in and can you give us something? Joe Flacco came in on the back half of the season. He looked very good. He wasn't his top quarterback in the NFL, but he found a way to go out there and win football games. So your starting quarterback is out. Your two top tackles, they're down for majority of the season. A banged up offensive line. Your star running back in Nick Chubb, he missed majority of the season. He got hurt against the Steelers early on. Monday Night Football game. Minka Fitzpatrick came down with a crazy tackle in that matchup. And Grant Delpit, he missed majority of the season dealing with an Achilles injury. And yet they still made the playoffs and they lost against the Houston Texans in the first round. So we all know in the past, Kevin Stefanski can coach his tail off. But this is the biggest problem with Cleveland. Making that trade for Deshun Watson. And I know we've talked about this a million times on this channel. But that is still a dark cloud that is hovering over this organization. And to be fair here to Haslam, the owner, when he made this trade, at that point in time, it was a solid trade. You're moving off of Baker Mayfield, which was a very huge risk. But a lot of Cleveland Browns fans, not all, they were happy to possibly see a franchise quarterback come into the building. But this was the biggest problem with Deshun Watson. He missed his entire last season with the Houston Texans. He was done with the organization. He held out. And there was a lot of allegations around this point in time with Deshun Watson off the field. We know all about that entire situation. So when you finally made the trade to bring in Deshun Watson, you had to give this man a brand new contract. You gave him one of the biggest contracts in NFL history up to that point, and it inflated the quarterback market till this day. You made a trade for multiple first-round picks and multiple picks in general just to bring in the quarterback, give him a massive contract, and he had yet to put on the Cleveland Browns uniform. That's insane. You could say Andrew Berry pulled the trigger, but Jimmy Haslam has come out and he's taking blame for that. He said that he took a huge swing and it was a huge miss. I put all that on him. That was one of the worst trades, if not the worst trade in NFL history. Personally, to me, that's the worst trade in NFL history for the Cleveland Browns. You've got nothing out of that trade. While the Houston Texans, they've got a bunch of young players that are up and coming in this league. And this is the biggest kicker with Deshun Watson in that trade. Remember when I said he missed all of his last season with the Texans? He missed 13 games when he was able to play with the Cleveland Browns, when he was fully healthy. And the reason why, the allegations off the field. So we're talking about a player here that essentially missed 2 years of live action. You don't get better by not playing in the NFL. You hopefully get better as you play, as you go on. But that was not the case here with Deshun Watson. He could not practice with the team. He could not build down the chemistry with Kevin Stefanski within those 13 games. So when he comes in, he looks solid for the rest of the season that first year. He didn't look like the old Deshun Watson. He still looked rusty. But his first full year as a starter with the Cleveland Browns, he gets a full training camp offseason workouts, goes down with an injury. And that has been the story with Deshun Watson. Can't stay healthy, and when he's on the field, he looks completely terrible with this organization. This is a player that suffered a torn ACL early on with the Houston Texans his rookie season. Hurt his shoulder with the Cleveland Browns, tore his Achilles. Not once, but twice in Cleveland. Once on the field and did not heal properly, and some things happened off the field. He's a bust of a trade. But the Kevin Stefanski situation and the problems that I have with him, it has been the in-game management, clock management over the last few years, and quarterback management in general. Even though his hands have been tied because of Deshun Watson, we have still seen him work with other quarterbacks in this league. When you look at this offseason, you bring back Joe Flacco. You wanted the quarterback to be comfortable in this system because Deshun Watson went down with that Achilles injury. He's not on pace to play this season. Fine, whatever. We all know what Joe Flacco is in his career, especially up to this point. He's just a backup at best, but you brought him in. You're hoping that you can get the most out of Joe Flacco once again. So you have him taking first team reps in practice. You drafted not one, but two quarterbacks this year. Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon and Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. Which is still mind-boggling to me that Shedeur Sanders went in the 5th round. More on him and his situation in a second here. But those are 3 quarterbacks on your roster. Then you bring in Kenny Pickett via trade. And all the reports that came out is that Kevin Stefanski, he's a huge fan of Dillon Gabriel. He was always intrigued by Kenny Pickett. Now you got to see Kenny Pickett work with the Steelers. Did not work out. He was a bust. Then they shipped him off to the Philadelphia Eagles. He realized they're going to bring in Russell Wilson. He didn't want the competition. He wants to go elsewhere. It is what it is. Jalen Hurts goes down with a concussion last year. They were depending on Kenny Pickett to go out there and help them win football games. That did not happen. He looked terrible with the Eagles, and he dealt with injuries yet again. And he dealt with injuries with the Steelers. So the Eagles, they move off of him. Those are 2 teams right now that could not work with Kenny Pickett. But you're thinking the Cleveland Browns can resurrect this man's career? You have 4 quarterbacks at this point in time in practice. They're all taking reps. You have Joe Flacco, the veteran. More than likely was going to be your starter since day one. You have Kenny Pickett. He comes in, he's taking reps from Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Doesn't it make sense to go out there and give more reps to Dillon Gabriel and the same with Shedeur Sanders? Because they're both in their rookie contracts, and you hope that one of those guys can be the quarterback of the future with this organization? It was never going to be Kenny Pickett. And Joe Flacco is 41 years old. He's not going to play for the next 5 to 10 years. It's impossible. And I understand the magic that Joe Flacco had a few years ago, but look at what happened last season with the Indianapolis Colts. Then they bring in Tyler Huntley when Kenny Pickett went down with injuries. Then they moved off of Kenny Pickett. They traded him to the Las Vegas Raiders. The problem that I have with Kevin Stefanski starting in the preseason here. You have Dillon Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders. Now, Dillon Gabriel went down a hamstring injury. Here comes Shedeur Sanders. He has a good game against the Carolina Panthers. It's the preseason. It's not the regular season here. Most quarterbacks have looked great in the preseason. Kenny Pickett is one of them. The same with Mitch Trubisky. It doesn't carry over to the regular season. You would think that Shedeur Sanders would get more reps in practice with the first and second team. That was not the case. They signed Tyler Huntley. And in that last preseason game against the Los Angeles Rams, he doesn't let Shedeur Sanders finish the game. And Shedeur Sanders was not dealing with an injury. He calls in Tyler Huntley off the street. Finish this game, get us this win. And that's what Tyler Huntley did. Only to go out there and move on from Tyler Huntley and to have Joe Flacco, Dillon Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders as your quarterbacks on the roster. Wouldn't it have made more sense when Shedeur Sanders had that game against the Carolina Panthers for him to get more reps in practice and for him to finish out that game against the Los Angeles Rams? It's the preseason. And we've seen other coaches do this before. The same with Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. Now we come over to this year. The first couple weeks, Joe Flacco, he's Joe Flacco. Has some good moments, has some bad moments. In week 1, he played well enough for them to win that game against the Bengals. It came down to the kicker, missing the field goal. The 2 interceptions were not on Joe Flacco. They're on the wide receivers. Then after that, everything was downhill. Joe Flacco was slow. He was more so of a scarecrow inside the pocket. He was late on reads over and over again. So you benched Joe Flacco and you put in Dillon Gabriel. That's Kevin Stefanski's guy that they drafted in the 3rd round. Against the Minnesota Vikings, in my opinion, Dillon Gabriel did not play bad. He played well in the system. He didn't take many deep shots down the field. But we could say the same thing about Joe Flacco here, especially against the Baltimore Ravens. He looked completely terrible. But Dillon Gabriel came in last week against the Minnesota Vikings, 19-33, was able to go out there, work within the system, dink and dunk his way down the field for 190 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions. They had this game won. All you had to do was to go out there and continue to play through the run with Quinshon Judkins. Quinshon Judkins has been a very good running back in the NFL up to this point. He's averaging 4.6 yards a carry. And against the Vikings, he averaged 5 yards a carry. You went away from the run game. Late in that matchup, you're throwing the football with Dillon Gabriel. And let's be honest here. I like Dillon Gabriel as a college quarterback. I got to see him at Oklahoma, the same in Oregon. He will never be a franchise quarterback in this league, regardless of what team he's on. He's more so of a mini game manager. That's it. So you run this offense through the hot hand with Quinshon Judkins, but you didn't do that. And you lost this matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. Your defense did not let you down. The coaching did. And against the Steelers, Dillon Gabriel in this matchup got sacked 6 times. He's getting pressured constantly, over and over and over again by TJ Watt, Herbig, Alex Highsmith, and even Jalen Ramsey. He had 2 sacks, 29 of 52, 221 passing yards, averaged 4.3 yards a carry, 4.3 yards a throw, pardon me. He only had 4 passes that went for 10 plus yards in the air. He's dinking and dunking his way down the field. Now, I understand the offensive line right now is not particularly good, especially in pass protection. You had a lot of drops yesterday with Jerry Jeudy. And the same with David Njoku. But let's be honest here. Week 1, we saw Flacco go out there, have moments in this offense. A week ago against the Minnesota Vikings, Dillon Gabriel had some solid moments. This was one of the worst games I've seen by a quarterback this season. And one of the worst game plans by a head coach this year, because Kevin Stefanski is the main offensive play caller. He even said that he may give up play calling duties in the future. He should give up play calling duties right now. To have Dillon Gabriel throw the football 52 times in a matchup, he only had 221 passing yards. That is ridiculous. Dillon Gabriel, even though they had a lot of drops yesterday, this man was constantly overthrowing and underthrowing wide receivers over and over again. They call them hospital balls. Majority of this wide receiving core, if Dillon Gabriel continues to play like this, they're going to be in the emergency room every single weekend. He was terrible yesterday. And I don't want to play the bias card here, but we saw him pull Shedeur Sanders in the preseason because he held on to the football for a very long time. He was getting pressured. He was getting sacked. I fully understand that. He's not a saint in this situation. But you mean to tell me, if that was Shedeur Sanders yesterday, he would have pulled him for Dillon Gabriel? I know that he would have. You still had the shot to go out there and potentially get back into this game. But you constantly see Dillon Gabriel overthrow wide receivers, throw the football into coverage. You didn't see this against the Minnesota Vikings, hurrying up the passes. And what Coach Austin, defensive coordinator with the Steelers, did, he just had them sit on top of the wide receivers and the tight end. It was 6 passes yesterday that should have went for interceptions, but they didn't. And he kept Dillon Gabriel in the game because that's this guy. Now, Jimmy Haslam has come out and he said that if Andrew Berry would have come to him Friday night during the NFL draft and he would have told him, hey, we're drafting Shedeur Sanders tomorrow, he would have told him, hell no. So Andrew Berry selected Shedeur Sanders. Jimmy Haslam didn't make them select Shedeur Sanders. He didn't hold them up in the room and say, we're drafting Shedeur Sanders and that's it. That's what a lot of people want to go off of. That's not the story here. And that's not the truth. Now, I'll leave the link to the interview in the comment section below with Haslam when he came out and he said that. So Shedeur Sanders is Andrew Berry's guy. I don't understand what Kevin Stefanski benefits from just going out there and just trying to make Dillon Gabriel be the superstar. It's never going to work. And they should start Shedeur Sanders in the next couple of games. And if you are a Shedeur Sanders fan, I would tell you to pump the brakes here. This is a Cleveland Browns organization. They have not been able to develop a quarterback worth a damn in many decades here. Since 1999, they've had 41 starting different quarterbacks. They're going to have 42 in the next couple of weeks because they will start Shedeur Sanders sooner than later. Trust me, I know that for a fact. This isn't one of those situations I'm just speculating here. Dillon Gabriel does not have that long leash here. He may start another 2 games, then they're going to put in Shedeur Sanders. They want to evaluate the talent that they have in this quarterback room because they have 2 first-round picks in this year's draft class, the Jaguars pick and their own pick. But I'll say this, from what I'm seeing in college right now, this is not a good quarterback class. So they better hope that Dillon Gabriel can play better, or they better hope that Shedeur Sanders is their guy over the next couple of years. But I don't even want to see Shedeur Sanders start with this team. The offensive line protection is terrible. The play calling is horrible with Kevin Stefanski. The wide receivers can't catch. They can't take deep shots down the field. And as soon as they put Shedeur Sanders in, this is a quarterback coming out of college. I had him rated as the second best quarterback next to Cam Ward coming out of college. I still think that he could be a very good player in this league. But the negatives here, he holds on to the football for a very long time. We saw this at Jackson State, the same at Colorado. Playing behind this offensive line, it may get him killed. He needs to get the football out quicker, and we saw this in the preseason against the Carolina Panthers, against their backups. He looked good. I believe that there is more upside with Shedeur Sanders than it is with Dillon Gabriel. But Kevin Stefanski thinks otherwise. But I doubt that any one of these guys on this roster right now will be the franchise quarterback long term. This is just one of those organizations that can't develop a quarterback. They should have stuck with Baker Mayfield, but they didn't. And you need to run this offense through Quinshon Judkins coming out of the backfield and work off a play action with David Njoku if he can stay fully healthy, and the same with Jerry Jeudy. Isaiah Bond is becoming a very good target with this team, and they got lucky with Isaiah Bond. He had an allegation that was false off the field. So he went undrafted. There was easily a player that could have been selected in the 2nd or 3rd round. So they're still thin at wide receiver. But this is a timing system, and you need to be very accurate. The one thing that we know about Shedeur Sanders, even though he holds on to the football for a very long time, he wants to play hero ball. He was very accurate at the college level. Not saying that that's going to translate over to the NFL. I'm just going based off what I've seen from college here, because we haven't seen him play in the regular season just yet. But I've had enough of Dillon Gabriel after just one game against the Steelers yesterday, and I've had enough of Kevin Stefanski calling plays this organization. This was a problem last season. They had the 2nd most pass attempts in the NFL. And you had Jameis Winston starting games because, once again, Deshun Watson can't stay fully healthy. And they did look good for a couple games with Jameis Winston. We've seen them throw the football a lot in the past with Bailey Zappi when he started some games with the Browns. Once again, Kevin Stefanski and his offense. They've moved on from offensive coordinators before, but at the end of the day, this is his offense. And even the same with Deshun Watson. When Deshun Watson missed 13 games, the man had 45 pass attempts in one of those matchups towards the end of the season. I don't understand what his factuation is with just going out there and trying to force the quarterback to have this many pass attempts in the matchup when you've had running backs like Jerome Ford, Nick Chubb. Now, Nick Chubb was a significantly better player than Jerome Ford, but Jerome Ford has been solid in the past. Run this offense through your running backs. Simplify this offense for your quarterbacks. Scheme open those wide receivers. Do the same thing that you did in 2020, even though you had a better team on paper. And if he can't do that, they need to move on from Kevin Stefanski. Defensively here, they have one of the best defenses in football right now. Carson Schwarzenegger is a very good football player that they selected in the 2nd round out of UCLA. You have Mason Graham, who will be a star defensive tackle in no time with this roster playing alongside Myles Garrett. And I love their draft class this year. Throw Shedeur Sanders out the window here, even though I really like Shedeur Sanders coming out of Colorado, and especially where you got him in the 5th round. This draft class already is elite on paper. You're getting a lot of production out of these kids early on. Especially Schwarzenegger. If Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah can return next season, that could be a very fun linebacking duo. But I'm afraid that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah may not return to the NFL because of a serious neck injury that he suffered last year against the Baltimore Ravens and Derrick Henry. But I look at it from this standpoint. The Cleveland Browns, just to be honest here, even if they do put in Shedeur Sanders, not much may change. I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for Dillon Gabriel. I want to see the Cleveland Browns have a good quarterback. But the last good, consistent quarterback that they had was Baker Mayfield in 2020. And that was it. And look at what Baker Mayfield is doing now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You stick with the quarterback and you build around them. And all the scouts, you don't have to take my word for it. And please don't take the scouts' words for it. The scouts have come out and they've said that Cam Ward reminded them of Patrick Mahomes. The same with Bryce Young. Don't take their word for it. Go and watch the college games for yourself. I don't see one quarterback right now that stands out at the college level. They hyped up Arch Manning out of Texas. He hasn't looked good at Texas. Has not lived up to the hype. They talked about the quarterback at Oregon. early Saturday. He's very inconsistent. Drew Aller for Penn State has had a lot of inconsistent moments. He just went down with a season-ending injury. Then you have Carson Beck, who went from Georgia. He's now in Miami. You may say that he's the most consistent quarterback at the college level, but many scouts have him being a second and third round pick. So I don't see any quarterback in this NFL draft cycle this year that can walk through the door and could potentially be a franchise quarterback for the Cleveland Browns long term. So you either hope that Dillon Gabriel is your guy, and if he's not, you go with Shedeur Sanders and you see what you have. The perfect situation here for Cleveland would be Kirk Cousins. And hold on, I can see it right now. His contract is abysmal. They're not going to trade for Kirk Cousins. If he didn't have that contract, he'll be the right player for this system. Kevin Stefanski got to work with him and the Minnesota Vikings. But a veteran like that, and maybe the Atlanta Falcons, they move off of Kirk Cousins after this season. Then you could bring him in as a free agent. But your perfect situation is to bring in a veteran player that can help elevate this offense to the next level. And then you draft a quarterback behind them that could possibly develop. That is the role here for the Cleveland Browns. But that's went all the way out the window now. I hope that Shedeur is the guy. Hope that Dillon Gabriel can play better. But right now, with the Cleveland Browns being 1-5, and they could easily have another win on the season, maybe even 3 if it wasn't for coaching, this is just one of the worst situations in the NFL. And if you're a Shedeur Sanders fan, get ready for the blowback, because they put him in this game and he doesn't look good. You're going to have a lot of people come out. They're going to be saying, see, we told you all along he wasn't good at Colorado. He went against trash talent. We told you this at Jackson State, even though he had chances to go elsewhere in college. But let me know in the comment section below how you feel about the Cleveland Browns and should they bench Dillon Gabriel very soon. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, I want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless. Peace.